Naline was only a small girl when she became separated from her people. She remembered the day clearly, although she wished she could forget it. Her tribe had been moving across the land, looking for a safer place to stay, because the world around them was changing more and more. New towns were growing, new families were arriving, and the quiet places her people once knew were becoming crowded. The elders decided to travel farther toward the mountains, where the land felt familiar and the wind carried the songs of their ancestors. Naline walked close to her mother that day, holding a small woven pouch she had made with her own hands. She liked the way the sunlight touched the ground through the trees, making bright spots that looked like stepping stones. But as the group moved, the path became confusing. The forest was thick, and the sounds of footsteps echoed in all directions. Naline tried to stay close, but at some point she fell behind while picking berries near the trail. When she looked up again, her tribe had already moved ahead. She called out softly, but her voice was too small, and the forest swallowed her words. She tried following the footprints, but the wind stirred the dust, and the path became unclear. She walked in the direction she believed her family had gone. But every turn looked the same: tall trees, scattered rocks, and the long grass whispering in the breeze. Even as a child, Naline was calm. Her mother had taught her to breathe slowly whenever she felt afraid. So she sat down on a warm stone, closed her eyes, and remembered her mother's voice. "If you ever feel lost," she had said, "look for signs from the land. The earth is wise, and it loves those who walk respectfully."
Alan
decided to wait. She believed her people would come back for her once they noticed she was missing. They always looked after one another. The tribe was her whole world, her friends, her teachers, her family, and she could not imagine them leaving her behind. She stayed near the place where she had last seen them, first for a few hours, then through the evening, and finally through the night. When morning came, Naline still waited. She built a small shelter using branches the way her father had shown her. She collected water from a nearby stream and gathered roots and berries that she knew were safe. She was young, but she had learned many skills from watching the adults work. Her people believed children learned best by doing things with their hands. Naline had always been eager to help with gathering, cooking, and weaving. Days passed. She stayed close to the path, hoping she would hear familiar voices calling her name. Every sound made her heart jump: a distant animal cry, the rustle of leaves, even the chatter of birds. She would stand up quickly and look around, expecting to see her family walking toward her with open arms. But each time, she saw only the empty trail and the endless stretch of trees. After a while, Naline began to understand that her people might not return soon. She did not know what had happened or why they had not come for her, but she trusted that they loved her. She told herself they must have been pushed farther away by circumstances she could not see. Maybe the group had been forced to move quickly. Maybe they believed she had already gone ahead. The thought kept her heart soft rather than broken. Naline did not want to leave the area. A small part of her always believed that if she went too far, her family would return and miss her once again. So she stayed near the place she last saw them, building her little home deeper in a sheltered hollow where the rocks formed a natural wall. She wove grasses together to make a small mat and shaped a sleeping place under a leaning tree. It was not as comfortable as the woven hut she once shared with her parents, but it kept her warm during cool evenings. As the seasons changed, Naline grew from a child into a young woman. She learned to live quietly with the land. She woke with the sunrise and slept with the stars. She found new ways to gather roots and nuts, and she followed the trails of deer to discover safe paths through the forest. She learned which plants healed cuts and which made her feel strong during long walks. Her tribe had always taught respect for nature, and that respect helped her survive. Yet she never forgot her family. Every morning she whispered a short prayer to the sky, asking the spirits to guide her people back to her. Every night she looked at the stars and tried to imagine her parents looking at the same sky far away. She believed that as long as they all looked upward, or still connected, the loneliness was deep, but it never turned her heart bitter. Instead, Naline filled her days with memories. She remembered her mother brushing her hair, her father teaching her how to shape a bowstring, her grandmother humming soft songs while stirring stew. These memories kept her company, like warm fires that never went out. Sometimes, when the wind was gentle, she would hear a sound that reminded her of a laughter she once knew, or the steady rhythm of her tribe's drum. She knew it was only the forest speaking, but she liked pretending that the land was trying to comfort her. She believed the spirit of the earth watched over her. It's the same way it watched over her ancestors. Even though she was alone, she stayed hopeful. She kept her small woven pouch, the first thing she ever made, as a symbol of home. She filled it with small objects that meant something to her: smooth river stones, tiny feathers she found on the ground, leaves with beautiful shapes. Each item reminded her that beauty existed even in hard times. Years slipped by like water flowing over stones. The world around her continued to change. She noticed new trails appearing where no trails had been before. She saw smoke rising from faraway places that once held only open fields. Sometimes she saw people riding horses in the distance, groups of travelers or families searching for land. Naylin always hid when she saw them, not because she was afraid, but because she did not know their intentions. She preferred to remain unseen until she understood more about their presence. In all the time she waited, not once did she stop believing that her tribe loved her. She imagined many reasons for their absence, but never allowed herself to believe they had forgotten her. That hope kept her spirit strong. It became a warm thread sewn into her days, guiding her like a soft hand on her shoulder. Still, the longer she remained alone, the more she began to feel the weight of time. She was no longer the small girl who waited on a rock for her mother to appear. She had become a young woman who could gather food, build shelter, and protect herself with calm wisdom. She carried years on her shoulders, yet her heart remained gentle. Sometimes she wondered what her life would have been like if her tribe had returned that first night. She imagined running into her mother's arms, hearing her father's laugh, and rejoining the circle of families. She imagined learning new songs, new dances, and new stories from the elders. But imagining these things brought her peace rather than sadness. She believed that dreams kept people alive, especially when reality felt uncertain. One warm afternoon, Nellen sat near the stream where she often collected water. She dipped her fingers into the clear surface and watched the ripples spread. The sunlight made the water sparkle like tiny stars. As she gazed into the reflections, she wondered, would this be the place where her tribe finally returned? Would her mother recognize her after so many years? Would her father smile with pride when he saw how strong she had become? She closed her eyes and listened to the soft murmur of the stream. It reminded her of her grandmother's voice, steady and comforting. In that moment, she told herself that no matter how long it took, she would remain patient. She would stay open to whatever path the future brought her. The world could change, but she would not stop believing in love, family, the possibility of reunion. Little did she know that her life was about to shift in a way she could never have imagined. Her fate, long tied to waiting and hoping, was quietly being guided toward a new chapter. Someone she had never met, someone who walked a very different path, was drawing closer to the place she had called home for so many years. Naylin did not expect it. She had no sign, no dream, no whisper from the wind to warn her. She simply continued living her quiet life, unaware that her loneliness was nearing its end. The land had watched over her for years, but soon, a stranger would step into her world, someone who would bring answers, change, and a new beginning. She sat by the stream, watching the water flow gently forward, not knowing that her own story was about to flow in a new direction. The sun warmed her face, and the sky stretched wide above her, full of promise she had not yet seen. For now she remained the girl who waited, but not for much longer. Caleb Turner had traveled across many parts of the open land, but he had never expected his path to cross with someone like Naylin. His life was simple and steady. He woke up with the sun, cared for his horse, and followed the long dirt roads from one town to another. He worked where he could, fixing fences, guiding herds, delivering supplies, then moved on when the job was done. He liked the peace of the open sky more than the noise of crowded places. Caleb had always been observant. He noticed the way dust moved when the wind changed direction. He saw the smallest tracks of small animals in the soil. He could tell how old a footprint was by the softness of its edges. So when he rode past a quiet set of hills one afternoon and noticed thin smoke rising in a place where no cabin or camp should have been, he slowed his horse and studied the land carefully. The smoke was faint, almost shy, as if whoever made the fire wanted to stay hidden. Caleb felt curious. It was unusual for anyone to live alone so far from town. Travelers usually built their fires out in the open where they could be seen from a distance. This one was tucked behind rocks. It's barely visible unless someone looked closely. He followed the trail slowly, guiding his horse through tall grass that whispered against its legs. When he reached a small group of trees, he found something else's snare loops, set for catching animals. They were neat, simple, and carefully placed. Caleb knew the difference between a lazy setup and an expert one. Whoever made these snares had skill, patience, and knowledge of the land. He pulled back on the reins and paused. Who would be living out here? He wondered aloud. He had heard stories about families traveling, people looking for a new start, or workers moving between ranches. But he had never heard of someone settling, alone this deep into the hills. Part of him wanted to mind his own business and continue riding. He respected privacy more than most people, but another part of him felt uneasy. If someone was living alone this far away, maybe they needed help. Maybe they were hungry or lost, or simply too shy to ask for assistance. Caleb knew what loneliness felt like. He had spent years wandering the land on his own. Without a real home or family nearby, he decided to look deeper, but carefully. He did not want to frighten anyone. He found a narrow path leading up the side of a hill. It was faint, as if someone stepped there only when necessary. Caleb dismounted and led his horse up the slope. When he reached the top, he saw a small shelter built into the hollow of two fallen trees. It wasn't large, but it was sturdy and well hidden. Dried leaves covered the roof, blending it into the surroundings. He stepped forward quietly and called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" His voice was gentle, not loud. There was no answer. He circled the shelter and noticed signs that someone lived there recently. A clay pot sat near a rock. A few berries lay drying on a smooth log. A woven bag made of grass fibers hung from a branch. Everything was neatly arranged, as if the person living here valued order and respect for their belongings. Caleb felt a moment of admiration. Whoever lived here had lived with care, not fear. He looked around one more time, then decided not to stay. He did not want to intrude. Before leaving, he placed a small cloth bundle near the entrance, a little food, a small tin cup, and a piece of soft cloth. He hoped it would not scare them, but instead show kindness. Then he returned to his horse and rode away. What Caleb didn't know was that Naylin had been watching him from a distance. She had seen him riding up the hill and hid among the trees, not because she feared him, but because she wasn't sure what he wanted. She saw him leave the bundle and quietly walk away. His actions surprised her. She expected strangers to take things, not give them. That evening, when the sun turned orange and gold, Naylin approached the bundle and gently opened it. She studied each item with careful hands. The cloth was soft, smoother than anything she could weave herself. The food inside smelled unfamiliar but warm. She didn't eat it right away. She placed it aside for later, as if saving it for a moment when she might truly need it. The cup fascinated her most. It was metal, something she rarely saw, and she held it close to her face to look at the reflection of her eyes inside it. That night, she sat by the fire, thinking about the stranger. She had seen travelers before, but none had ever left something for her. She wondered why he did it. Was he simply kind? Or did he expect something? She did not know, but she remained alert. Days passed. Caleb continued his journey, but he kept thinking about the hidden shelter. Something inside him refused to forget. He felt a pull to check on the person living there, just to be sure they were safe. So, a few days later, he returned. This time, he saw movement. A figure darted behind a tree the moment he came near. Caleb stopped moving. He raised his hands slightly from his sides to show he meant no harm. "It's okay," he said softly. "I won't bother you. I just want to see if you're all right." There was no reply, but he felt someone watching him. He placed another small bundle of supplies near the shelter, just like before. "I'll leave these here," he said. "You don't have to come out." He turned and started walking away. But just as he reached his horse, he heard a small rustle. He turned slowly and saw her, a young woman, standing partly behind a tree. Watching him with careful eyes, she looked shy, unsure, yet curious. Her clothing was simple, made from natural fibers. Her hair fell around her shoulders, slightly tangled from the wind. She held herself with quiet strength, like someone who knew the land better than she knew people. Caleb smiled gently and didn't move closer. "Hello?" he said. "My name is Caleb. I didn't mean to disturb you." Nalin didn't speak. She wasn't used to speaking the stranger's language much. She looked at him, then at the second bundle he left. Her eyes softened a little with gratitude, but she stayed silent. "It's okay," Caleb said softly. "You don't have to say anything." Nalin stepped forward slowly, picked up the bundle, then stepped back again. Caleb nodded politely, then mounted his horse. He didn't want her to feel overwhelmed. "I'll come back in a few days," he said kindly. "If that's all right." He rode away without waiting for an answer. Giving her space and time to decide whether she wanted him to return, Nalin watched him go, unsure what to think. She wasn't frightened of him. Something about him felt honest. His horse walked calmly, and he didn't carry himself like someone who wanted to take anything. She noticed how he lowered his voice when speaking, as though he didn't want to startle her. In the days that followed, Caleb returned again. Each time, he brought something small: wildflower honey, a wool blanket, or a smooth stone he found by the river that he thought she might like. Little by little, Nalin began to trust him. She spoke only a few words at first, but Caleb listened patiently, encouraging her with soft smiles. He learned her name, though she said it quietly. "Nalin," she whispered one evening as the sky faded into soft purple hues. Caleb repeated it gently, careful not to mispronounce it. She seemed surprised that he tried so respectfully. As more days passed, they began sharing small pieces of their lives. Nalin showed him the stream where she collected water and the place where wild herbs grew. Caleb showed her how to calm a horse by placing a hand on its neck. She watched with wonder. Feeling the gentle connection between animal and human, Caleb slowly learned that Nalin had been waiting for her tribe for many years. The moment he realized this, a heavy feeling settled in his heart. He knew that many groups had been moved far away over time. It hurt him to think she might still be waiting for something that might never happen, but he didn't tell her anything yet. He wanted to understand more before speaking. He also didn't want to break her spirit, especially when he saw how deeply her hope lived inside her as the sunsets grew warmer and the days longer. Caleb found himself thinking about Nalin even when he was far from her shelter. He admired her strength, her softness, her quiet wisdom. He knew she had lived alone for many years, yet she remained gentle and hopeful. There was something rare and beautiful about that. He visited often, but always with respect. He never forced conversation. He never stepped into her shelter unless she invited him. And slowly, Nalin began to smile more when he arrived. She looked forward to his visits. She didn't fully understand why, but Caleb brought a kind of peace she hadn't known for years. His presence felt steady, like the earth beneath her feet. His voice felt calm, like the stream she listened to every morning. One afternoon, while they sat near the fire, Nalin looked at him with eyes full of trust she didn't usually give to strangers. Caleb felt the weight of that trust and knew something important. Her story was changing, and he was becoming part of it. Caleb rode away from Nalin's shelter one cool morning with a mind full of questions. He had learned many things about her over the past weeks, but the most important detail stayed heavy on his heart. She had been waiting for her tribe for many years, believing they would return for her at any moment. She spoke about them with such love and certainty that Caleb could almost see the memories shining in her eyes. She still called her mother's name softly sometimes, as though the wind might carry it back to her family. Caleb wanted to help her, but he didn't want to say anything until he was sure of the truth. It didn't feel right to break someone's hope without understanding the full story. So he decided he would try to learn what happened to her people, but he also knew he had to be gentle. Nalin was not fragile, but her heart held years of silent longing. Caleb had to step with care. He rode toward the nearest trading post. which was little more than a wooden building, standing quietly near a river. A few wagons rested outside, and a couple of travelers walked around, talking softly. It wasn't a busy place, but it was where news traveled through stories from the towns, from the reservations, from the movements of families and groups across the land. Caleb tied his horse and walked inside. A friendly old man named Harold greeted him with a nod. Harold had run the trading post for many years, and he remembered countless people who came and went. If anyone knew anything about the movements of tribes, it would be him, Caleb asked carefully. Harold, do you know whether any Apache families came through this area some years back? Maybe moving toward the west or south? Harold thought for a moment, rubbing his beard. Well now, he said slowly, there were many groups moving many years ago. Some were settled on reservations. Some traveled farther. It was a hard time for anyone trying to keep their families together. Caleb nodded. He didn't mention Naylin by name. He didn't want to betray her trust. He simply asked about the general movement of her people. Harold sighed gently. Most families from this region were guided toward a reservation far south. A few smaller groups stayed hidden for a while, moving through the hills. But over time, most were gathered. I don't reckon many remained in these parts afterward. Caleb felt a quiet ache inside. If most had been moved far away, it meant Naylin had been waiting in a place where her tribe had not returned for a very long time. She didn't know the world had shifted around her. She didn't know that the place she thought was still important in her people's journey had been left behind long ago. He thanked Harold and rode on to another settlement. There, he met a few families who remembered seeing tribes pass through many years earlier. They told him stories of long journeys, tired footsteps, and families trying to stay together. Some said they saw groups traveling with guides who promised safety. Others said they heard of families being separated because of long distances or sudden changes. Caleb listened to every word. He pieced together a quiet truth. Naylin's tribe had likely moved far away during a time she didn't understand. They probably searched for her early on, but with the land shifting and new paths forming, it must have been impossible for them to return to the exact place where she waited. The hills were wide, the forests deep. Time had flowed forward without mercy. He rode back toward her shelter slowly, thinking about how he would tell her. He imagined her face, how calm she always looked, how patient she was, and he wondered whether he had the right to change her world with painful truth. But he also knew that keeping her in the dark wasn't kindness either. She deserved honesty. She deserved a chance to choose her future with open eyes, not blind hope. When he reached her shelter, the sun was just beginning its slow descent, painting the sky with soft orange light. Naylin was kneeling by the fire, drying herbs she had gathered. She looked up when she heard his steps and gave him a small smile. One of her gentle smiles that always made him feel welcome. Caleb sat down across from her, but his heart felt heavier than usual. He didn't speak right away. Naylin noticed his quietness. She studied him with her thoughtful eyes, sensing something had changed. You went far, she said softly, choosing her words with care. Yes, he replied. I traveled to nearby places. I spoke to some people. Naylin tilted her head slightly. She waited for him to continue. Caleb looked at the fire because it was easier than looking at her. I asked about your people, he said gently. I wanted to learn where they went. I hoped I would hear something that would bring you answers. Naylin's hands stilled. She placed the herbs aside and folded her fingers in her lap. Her eyes were calm, but a small flicker of worry passed through them. Caleb took a slow breath. I learned that many families were guided far south years ago. They settled on land that was chosen for them. And some smaller groups stayed hidden for a while, but later moved too. The lands changed. The paths changed. It became hard to return. Naylin looked at him without speaking. Her face didn't show fear, but something gentler like quiet sadness beginning to form, like mist rising before dawn. Caleb continued softly, not wanting to hurt her. But knowing he had to speak truth, I think your family must have moved with one of those groups, he said. Maybe they came back looking for you at first, but the land was too wide. Maybe they were asked to move quickly. Maybe they believed you were ahead of them somehow. I don't know the exact reasons, but... He hesitated, then added, I don't think they've been in these hills for many years. The air grew still. The fire crackled gently, but the world around them felt silent. Naylin lowered her gaze, staring at her hands. For a long time, she didn't speak. Caleb didn't rush her. He respected her quiet. Her heart had held hope for so many years. And now she was slowly letting that hope settle into a new shape. After what felt like a long while, she spoke softly. They did not forget me. Caleb shook his head gently. No, I don't believe they forgot you. I think they were moved far away. I think they hoped you were safe somewhere. People don't forget the ones they love. Naylin pressed her lips together. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She simply let the truth sit in her heart like a stone dropped gently into deep water. The ripples moved slowly through her. She stood up and walked a few steps away from the fire, letting the evening breeze touch her face. Caleb watched her quietly. He could see how much she was thinking. He wished he could take the pain from her, but he knew she had to feel it to move forward. After several minutes, Naylin looked up at the sky. The first star was appearing, shining softly. My mother used to say, she whispered, that the sky keeps our stories safe. If our people walk under the same stars, we are still together. I thought my family would walk back to me under these stars. Caleb stepped closer, but not too close. He wanted to be near her without crowding her. They may be far, he said gently, but you still carry their stories. You still carry their songs. That is a kind of togetherness, too. Naylin opened her eyes slowly. She turned toward him, her expression calm, even though her heart was shifting inside her. I waited, she said softly. For so long. Caleb nodded. You were brave. You survived. You kept your spirit strong. That is something your family would be proud of. Quiet breath escaped her, somewhere between sadness and relief. She wasn't collapsing. She wasn't breaking. She was adjusting, letting her memories settle in a new way. She walked back to the fire and sat down beside him. The flames warmed their faces as the evening deepened. Naylin wrapped her arms around her knees and leaned her chin on them. What do I do now? She asked softly, not as a plea, but as a sincere question. Caleb hesitated, knowing the answer mattered. You can choose, he said. You are no longer waiting. You can walk toward something new instead of standing still. Naylin listened carefully. You could let me take you to the place where some families live now, Caleb continued. There may be people who know your family. There may be elders who know their names. You might find someone who remembers them. Naylin's eyes widened slightly with quiet wonder, as though a sunrise had appeared far in the distance. Or, Caleb added gently, you can stay here. I will still visit you. No matter what, you are not alone anymore. Naylin looked into the fire for a long moment. Her heart felt tender, but peaceful in a new way. The truth had changed her world. But it had also opened a new path, one she had never imagined before. Caleb came into her life. She reached into her woven pouch and touched a smooth stone she carried. It reminded her of her childhood. She smiled softly, not with joy or sorrow, but with a new kind of acceptance. Finally, she looked up at Caleb. My story is not finished, she whispered. Caleb smiled gently. No, it's just beginning. The fire crackled softly between them while the stars brightened above, shining on the girl who had waited for years and the man who had come to guide her toward her future. The morning after Naylin learned the truth, the world felt different to her. The trees still stood tall, the stream still whispered softly, and the sky still stretched endlessly above her. But her heart no longer felt trapped between waiting and wondering. She had spent years standing still, holding on to the hope that her tribe would return to the place where she had last seen them. Now she understood that the journey she believed would bring them back had led them far away instead. For the first time in many years, Naylin felt she could choose her next step without fear. She watched the sunrise gently touch the hills and felt a quiet strength rise within her. She wasn't the little girl who had been left behind. She was a young woman who had survived, learned, grown, and carried the spirit of her people in her heart. Caleb arrived at her shelter just as the sun began to warm the land. He tied his horse under the shade of a tree and approached her with a kind, steady expression. He didn't want to rush her or push her. He simply stood near, waiting for her to decide if she wanted to speak first. Nayland looked at him and gave a small nod. It wasn't a smile, but it wasn't sadness either. It was a sign of quiet determination. "I am ready," she said softly. Caleb's brows lifted slightly, not with surprise, but with gentle respect. "Ready for what?" he asked, allowing her to choose the meaning of her own words. Nayland looked toward the distant hills. "To go where my people are," she replied. "I want to see if any family remains. I want to hear their voices again, even if their faces are new. I want to know their stories so I can carry them in my heart." Caleb felt warmth in his chest. He was proud of her courage. "I can take you," he said. "The journey is long, but we can travel slowly. You won't be alone." Those words felt comforting. Nayland nodded again, and together they began preparing for the journey. It took time, but neither of them minded. Nayland collected the tools and small treasures she had saved over the years. Her woven pouch, the smooth stones, the feathers, the memories she kept in quiet corners of her shelter, all of these were part of who she was. Caleb helped her pack water, dried food, soft blankets, and things she would need along the way. He treated her belongings with care, as though each item held a piece of her story, before they left. Nayland stood before her shelter one last time. She touched the smooth curve of the fallen tree that had protected her through storms and winters. She ran her fingers across the woven mat she had made from grasses. She closed her eyes and thanked the land silently for giving her strength and safety when she needed it most. Caleb watched her quietly, knowing this place held years of her life. When she finally stepped away, she walked with calm confidence. They began their journey the next morning. Caleb guided the horse slowly, sometimes leading it on foot so Nayland could walk beside him. She liked walking. She felt the earth beneath her feet, felt the breeze on her face, and listened to the sounds of birds calling from the treetops. It comforted her to know the land remained kind to her as they traveled. Nayland and Caleb talked more than before. She told him stories her mother once shared about the stars, the rivers, and the way her people believed that every living thing carried a spirit. Caleb listened with interest, wanting to know everything that shaped her heart. In return, Caleb told her about the places he had seen during his travels. He described mountains covered in snow, towns filled with music, and rivers so wide they looked like moving mirrors. Nayland listened carefully, fascinated by a world she had never explored. Sometimes they walked in peaceful silence. Other times she asked about the horse, and Caleb showed her how to stroke its neck to let it know she was a friend. She learned how to guide it gently by touching the reins with soft movements. At first, she was uncertain, but soon she began to understand. Animals recognized her calm nature. The horse trusted her quickly. After several days of travel, the land began to change. The air grew warmer. The hills softened into long stretches of open plains. Nayland felt nervous sometimes when the land looked unfamiliar. But Caleb always reassured her. "You're doing well," he would say, "and I'm right here." His words made her heart steady again. They passed small settlements where families waved kindly. Some people looked at Nayland with curiosity, but Caleb's respectful presence made her feel safe. She stayed close to him when she needed to, and stood tall when she felt brave. One evening, as they rested near a wide river, Nayland looked at the sky and spoke softly. "Do you think my family will remember me?" Caleb looked at her with gentle honesty. "I think love remembers, even when time passes. And even if they do not recognize your face at first, your spirit carries your family's story. They will feel that." Nayland placed her hand over her heart and nodded. She wanted to believe it. Caleb's calm confidence made her feel it might be true. When they finally reached the reservation, where members of her tribe had been settled, Nayland stood still for a long moment. She felt her heart beating fast, not from fear, but from the weight of all the years she had waited. The place was peaceful. There were simple homes, wide open spaces, and people moving quietly from one place to another. Smoke drifted gently from small fires, where families cooked together. Caleb stayed a step behind her, letting her take in the moment at her own pace. A few people noticed her and paused. They saw something familiar in her eyes, something that carried the spirit of the land they came from. An older woman with gentle lines on her face stepped forward. She looked at Nayland long and thoughtfully. "What is your name, child?" the woman asked. Nayland swallowed softly and replied, "Nayland, daughter of Tala and Tocha." The woman's eyes widened with surprise, and then a soft, emotional smile spread across her face. "I knew your mother," she whispered. "Your family traveled with our group many years ago. They spoke your name many times." She stepped closer, her voice gentle. "We thought you were lost to the hills, but your spirit stayed with us all this time." Nayland felt tears rise to her eyes, not in sadness, but in relief. She bowed her head respectfully, and the woman placed her hands gently on Nayland's shoulders. Welcoming her with warmth and history, others gathered around. Some recognized her family name, some remembered stories. Many simply wrapped her in gentle acceptance. Seeing her as one of their own, Caleb stood back, watching Nayland find her place among people who shared her roots. He felt a deep sense of peace, knowing she was no longer alone. Over the next days, Nayland learned many things about her tribe's history, where they traveled, how they settled, and the lives they've built together. She met elders who knew her parents' stories, children who wanted to learn old traditions, and families who welcomed her into their circles as though she had always belonged. But even as she found comfort, she never forgot Caleb. He visited her often. He helped with small tasks, and sometimes he simply sat with her under the shade of a tree, listening as she shared what she had learned. Their bond grew stronger, not rushed, not forced, but quiet and steady, like the rhythm of the stream she once lived beside. Nayland began teaching children the songs and words she remembered from her early years. She showed them how to weave grass into small patterns and how to read the land with gentle respect. She carried her traditions forward with pride. She felt no bitterness about the years she had spent alone. Instead, she felt gratitude for the strength those years gave her. And Caleb, who once wandered without direction, found new meaning too. Helping Nayland had changed him. Guiding her had opened his heart. He realized he didn't want to roam endlessly anymore. He wanted to stay near the people who had become important to him. He wanted to be part of something steadier than the open road. One evening, as the sun set behind soft hills and painted the sky with warm colors, Nayland and Caleb walked side by side. Neither spoke at first. Their steps were slow and peaceful. Finally, Nayland looked up at him with a gentle smile. "You helped me find my story again," she said softly. Caleb shook his head. "No," he replied kindly. "You carried your story all along. I only helped you see the path." Nayland touched the woven pouch she still kept close. It held the stones, feathers, and memories she had gathered. But now it also held pieces of her future. "You gave my waiting a purpose," she whispered. Caleb smiled. "And you gave my wandering a home." The sky grew darker, stars appearing one by one. Nayland looked up at them, feeling the same sense of connection she once felt alone in the hills, but now she stood beside someone who had become part of her heart. Her journey had changed. Her fate had shifted. She was no longer the girl who waited. She was the woman who walked forward, carrying her past with pride and her future with hope. And Caleb walked beside her, knowing that meeting her had changed his life forever. Their stories, once separate paths, now moved forward together under the same sky.